This podcast is part of the Everyday Heroes Podcast Network, the network for first responders and those who support them.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Hero Academy podcast. I created this podcast for you if you are a first responder, police officer, fireman, nurse, military personnel. This podcast is for you. Let's get your stories out. They need to be heard by everyone, especially the good ones. Let's share those stories and create some positivity out there in the world. Enjoy this episode. Hello. Welcome to this week's episode of the Hero Academy podcast. This week we have Cecil Rhambo with one of the greatest names of all time. What is this, Mr. Rhambo? What is this conference that you're at?
So this is the airport law enforcement, group. So it's all the cops that protect airports throughout the country.
All right. Yeah. I told you my brother-in-law was a chief of Long Island MacArthur Airport Police.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did that before I ever got on. So he used to tell me stories, finding what's the craziest thing you ever found in someone's bag? Bag of guns?
The amount of dope, particularly during COVID, we were surprised at how much dope was coming through the airport. So we're talking pounds and pounds of like gummies, and because California is legal, people think that they can just bring ungodly amounts of dope back and forth, and you can't.
Right. There are laws and there are limits.
That's right.
So how long do you have in law enforcement?
Almost 40 years. I started in 81.
81.
Yeah. So it's been a minute, but I did take a 5-year break. I worked from 81 to 2014 in the LA County Sheriff's Department, and worked everything from basic patrol to custody to narcotics to internal affairs a couple times. I moved all the way to the rank of assistant sheriff and retired in 2014. And then I took about almost 6-year break. I was a city manager, city administrator for a couple cities. And then I got this job about 4 years ago.
Oh man, God bless you, man. And you kept yourself in good shape too.
I'm trying. Yeah.
What do? You run? You do push-ups? What do you do?
All of that. Yep. I run. I just ran this morning at 6 out here, and I'm in San Antonio. It's pretty humid, but I ran yesterday at noon. Nothing crazy. I do, a lot of push-ups and sit-ups, and some light weights at the house, and then I have like a weight vest that I use for push-ups, and but I don't do anything crazy. I'm very consistent.
Yep. That's what I do. I'm very, very consistent with the calisthenics. I train every single day. That's what I do. And I never really go heavy. I don't go crazy anymore because now I'm just trying to not get hurt.
Yeah. The joints can't take it any longer. I get it,
Exactly. So were you working during the Rodney King riots?
Yeah, I was a young sergeant back then. I was working out of West Hollywood, and I was a sergeant back then.
Oh man. And then after that, were you working during the George Floyd riots too?
I was the chief at the airport then, and so I sent a squad out, and they got to experience what, quite frankly, was at some points pretty medieval. I mean, LAPD had an axe get thrown through their command post. They destroyed about $1 million worth of vehicles.
Oh my God.
It was pretty wild.
So you've actually worked through both. Which was worse? I guess the George Floyd.
I don't think that George Floyd was worse. I think Rodney King was worse, only because it was much more violent. More people got hurt and killed in that riot, and it, for the first time, because I was around when the 65 Watts riots occurred. I was 6 then, and I remember it was very close to my family home. But in the 92 riots, there were other groups of people that joined in, and the news kind of sparked and prompted riots in areas that, so normally, like in the riot situation, it's kind of like Watts was self-contained to Watts. The LA riots in 92 was all over the place, and it was really sporadic, and it was kind of like people were putting out fires. There was a loss of command in the very beginning. LAPD didn't really have command and control, and they were waiting for Chief Gates at the time to make a decision, and he didn't. And it just exploded from there. And it literally started like in my neighborhood where I had grown up, like down the street from my house.
Wow. So now you see mobs of kids. Like I feel like those mobs of kids, like the looting mobs. I feel like that is an extension of the 2020 anarchy that was going on. Do you agree with that, or do you just like what's your opinion on that?
I think it's a little bit of that. And if you remember when social media became like a real platform, they were doing flash mobs.
Yes.
Uh, and so I think it's just an extension of that. And then you have a lot of um, there's a lot of public and social media push about um, socioeconomic disparities. And so there's this idea that rather than destroy our own neighborhoods or rob our own people, we're going to go out where the haves have, and we're going to, you know, basically rob them. And if we do it in mass numbers and we're young enough, the DAs won't prosecute us. And because right now there's a lot of, DAs around the country that are relatively progressive that are not pushing incarceration or really punishment.
Yeah, between the fentanyl crisis, now it's the trank crisis, and these flash mobs, and then you have DAs that aren't really prosecuting. Um, and I'm seeing a lot of juvenile crimes myself too. A lot of stolen vehicles, a lot of theft. Um, it's really a shame, but I'm an optimist, so I really believe that uh everything swings back the other way eventually. And I believe that it will swing back at some point. I mean, you've had enough time in law enforcement to see things get really, really bad and then get good for a while and then get really, really bad again. And do you agree that things do swing like a pendulum, or do you think that it's all downhill from here?
No, I think things do. There's going to be some rationality that almost has to happen. Um, People forget during the '92 riots, even though Rodney King was like the focal point, that was really peak year for crime. We came off the heels of the PCP and the crack and all that, and the gang epidemic and the wars behind that, and three strikes emerged out of that, and crime really took a precipitous drop. And even the crime going on today really pales in comparison to the late 80s and early 90s, and people forget that, particularly violent crime. I think with these property crimes, you're going to see some stronger prosecutions for that and going after people in an organized fashion. So just as they're organized, task forces are getting organized to go after them and prosecute them on a different level. So I think that'll bring about some change. The where I see us not really moving the needle forward is dealing with our unhoused mentally ill
Mm.
population. We just simply don't have the mental health bed space. And so the real question is we need some policymakers that are going to really take a position where we start either forcing or implementing bed space and mandated, um, I guess, locked up or facilities where they have to go rather than it being an option like we have now.
Yeah, because the one thing that I hear about California is the homelessness is out of control.
Mhm.
Would you agree?
I think the whole West Coast is that way, and a lot of it is based on some of the policies, and the reality is the folks that are being left to live on the streets, they also are dying on the streets, and that is not compassionate, in my opinion. I'm only going to speak from my perspective, having been around a long time and seen it, and really been working with the unhoused population since 2004. There's a lot of reasons that people don't get into the system. It's fairly complex. I spoke to one of our elected officials when they were running about example, Section 8 housing. So when I was a city manager, I used to have a Section 8 program. I get out of prison. I can't go stay with my children's mother because she's in Section 8 housing. It doesn't allow for parolees to stay. You can house me in federal prison, but you can't allow me to have housing once I leave. There's a disconnect there. And I think, there's some opportunities there that should be taken advantage of. But the mental health piece, we are looking at, it's not just California. A lot of people want to blame Reagan and that whole thing, but we've had a lot of governors since Reagan. and we've had a lot of leadership throughout the country since Reagan. The reality is mental health facilities have really, if you look at like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or you can just look at all the news articles of all the insane asylums that were shut down because of just crazy treatment, because they just didn't really know what to do with folks. I think it needs to be reformed in that aspect, and there needs to be some real discussion about mental health.
Maybe there's a way to privatize it, but have the government oversee it somehow. I don't know, because you've been in government before. I've never been in government, but it seems as if there's a less expensive, better solution if you can find a way to privatize it somehow. Because we've had so many people released from these mental institutions in New York. It's Bellevue and Pilgrim State. They just basically shut them down and then let them free on the streets, and it never made sense to me. It never made sense. And the majority of the unhoused homeless population is mentally ill, and because I've seen people try to help them and they just don't want their help, like Catholic Charities attempt to help and they just don't want the help because they're mentally ill.
Well, I think if you think about some of the mentally ill, that if your own family won't help you, it's because you've burnt out all those bridges, right? So if your own people that really love you and care for you won't help you, and you are beyond help, that's one issue. The other issue about like Bellevue and all these other mental institutions is, I think that it's very difficult to understand mental health. It's very difficult to treat mental health. If you think about a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I get paid whether you get better or not, because, unlike a doctor, I can make you well based on treatment. But with mental health, they don't really know how to make people well. We really don't understand it. And I really suggest, and I'm going to probably, I don't know who watches this, but I'll suggest this, back in the late 80s, when they started introducing ADHD and all these other drugs for kids, it's interesting that we have this explosion of mentally ill people that are now adults who may have been on these drugs, and we don't know. But I think somebody should do like a correlation to that, the administration of these type of drugs, because God knows you can't trust pharmaceutical companies, but nobody talks about that. So,
what's how much longer do you think you're going to work?
you
Do
know
you have
what?
an idea?
I don't know. I mean, I'll divulge my age to your listeners. I mean, I'll be 65 in March. So,
Do you age out at any point?
no, I think you just age out because you just realize I'm getting too old for this, right? I think that, but for me, it's more of because I lead kind of a little bit of a blue zone type of life, right? Eating right, exercising, surrounding myself with good people, and that kind of stuff. But I do know that the body is not immortal, and so I do want to leave some time for myself to actually go out and enjoy life, and do some traveling and do some things. So I guess to basically answer your question, I'm not sure. I think my body will tell me, but I don't want to go when I have to go like that. You know what I mean?
So we talked about Hawaii. You've been to Hawaii a bunch of times?
I have, yeah,
And what's
yeah.
your favorite islands?
My favorite, by a pretty good margin, is Kona, the Big Island, which is
Okay.
actually the island of Hawaii.
Yes.
Yeah.
I stayed there twice, and I was there just a couple years ago. And the first time we stayed there, we stayed on the Big Island, and it's so diverse. There's so much that you can see between the volcanic craters, and then they got some small rainforest, not as much as Kauai. When I was in Maui, and so we stayed on the Big Island, and then we did a cruise around the rest of the islands. And I
Hmm.
remember going to a beach in Maui that was the largest beach I'd ever seen, from the amount of sand it was like a woods, and then it opened up to the beach, and
You
the
probably went to
beach,
Big Beach.
it probably was,
It's
but it
called
was
Big Beach.
it was the biggest, largest beach I'd ever seen in my entire life. Like from the point of where the sand went back to the woods,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Well, on the other side of Big Beach. So if you and I go there one day, as you're coming out to the beach and you look to your right, there's like a outcropping of coral lava and stuff. You climb over that. That's Little Beach. Little Beach is topless or nudist. And every Sunday they have like a drum circle or so. It's like going back to the '60s where you have like these hippies. It's a trip.
Do you have any connects in Hawaii still? Like, if I did go out there and I wanted to do a face-to-face interview with some law enforcement, do you have any connects in Hawaii?
Yeah, I'm at a conference with a guy named Brian Marcio, and he actually is he's a lieutenant. I think he's a lieutenant, maybe higher ranking, but he runs the Honolulu Airport Police, and so you can connect with him
All
certainly.
right. All right, cool. So now I have a reason to go to Hawaii because the plan is to take the show on the road and I want to do this face to face with you instead of all of my interviews up year to date have been remote, and I want to take it face to face so that we can really spend like some quality time, like just talking and, talking about your experiences. And it was there ever a time where you started to feel like a little burnt out? Like, so I'll take it two extremes. Was there ever a time when you started to feel like, I don't know if I can do this much longer? And was there ever a time where you were like, this is the greatest unit ever? Like, what was your favorite unit that you worked in?
Yeah.
Looking back, where you were like, man, this, because for me, it was the bicycles.
Well, I mean, honestly, I mean, Dave, I've had like a lot of I've been around a lot of crazy stuff in my career. Probably too much to go on in this show, but I'll tell you that probably the best rank I ever held was captain in the sheriff's department, because at that point you're kind of a chief of police, you run your own command, and I was in charge of Compton, and we had just started taking over Compton, policing them. And the irony of it is I was adopted from an orphanage in another country. My parents lived in Compton when I got adopted, so that was like my hometown basically. So it was really interesting to go back and really deal with um, this town that is notorious throughout the country. And my goal was to, when Starbucks came to Compton, I felt like I accomplished something. So by the time I had spent 3 years there, by the time I left, Starbucks was coming in, and then later on I came back as a city manager, and it's so that was great, So
And then when was like the most stressful time on the job for you?
oh God, so all right, I'll have to confess. So I've been involved in several shootings, right? So one of them was at least one was a friendly fire shooting, and I actually shot a partner of mine when we were working dope,
Oh my
and
God.
we were it just had to be there. But that was a defining moment in my life, whether I was going to stay in law enforcement or not. And we're still friends to this day. In fact, I gave him a job when I was in Compton later on, doing as a retiree. He runs security and parking and all that. But so that was really stressful. And then also when I was working dope, about a third of the bureau went to federal prison,
Oh my
uh,
God.
and those guys were doing. When later on, because you never know when you're in this big unit, you never know. You're like, oh, did you hear about so and so? You hear about so, and you're like, so you and the sergeant who went was my patrol sergeant, and so he was kind of like they were old SWAT guys, and so these were like OG dudes in the department back then. This is like the '80s, so they came on like in the '70s and
Right,
'60s,
right.
Vietnam vet dudes, crazy as the day is long, right? And when they got popped, there was just so much going on back in the '80s, like during the Miami Vice days of dope. That's when I was working dope, and cops are going down for stealing, people were getting killed. It was crazy, and
The
so
only thing that I remember is the Rampart scandal. The
mhm.
That's the Los Angeles gang team, right?
Yeah, and that was way after our team. Our team was in the '80s. Rampart was like the mid '90s, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
so
just before I got on because I didn't get on until 98. So
oh, okay. Oh,
like
you missed all the fun.
I know crack was dying down. Like crack was dying down and pills started to pick up and then heroin took off. But
Yeah.
when I first came on, people were still selling crack out in the open, but it's nowhere near what it used to be.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it
Nowhere
was.
near. Like I
Yeah,
knew that it was dying. It was a dying breed.
yeah. Like the movie Clockers, right? So all of that stuff was going on when I was working dope. You know.
And
So
then I watched a little bit of I watched the whole seasons of Snowfall, which all takes place in California. And just the amount of drugs that was moving through California during those years when you were in those like the 80s, the whole 80s and 90s, the amount of cocaine that was moving through California is just like mind blowing.
dude, so that show portrays a cat named Ricky Ross, right? And so when Ricky got out of prison, because Ricky was supposed to do life, right? I'm a division chief, uh, running all of gang operations and some other stuff in LA. Who calls me up? I don't even know this cat, right? Now, when I was working dope, I was chasing Ricky. Never met him, never saw him, never caught him. And Ricky gets released out of prison. He calls me up and goes, "Hey, man, hey, Rhambo." I go, "Who's this?" He goes, "This is Rick Ross." I go, "Get the F out of here, man. Why are you calling me?" He says, "Man, everybody tells me you're the guy to talk to, man. I don't want to work in the jails. I want to keep your brothers from getting arrested and blah, blah, blah. You know, and if you ever see Ricky, Ricky is like 5'3", all of
Wow.
like 110 pounds. Little dude, you know. I was like, wow. But
That's
so I have his
that's the
reputation.
rapper Rick Ross took his name
No,
from.
no, no. This is the Ricky Ross, dope dealer Ricky Ross, and Freeway Rick is what they called him here in LA or
Freeway
in LA.
Rick.
Yeah, Freeway
No, but
Rick, and he had a connection with the.
I'm saying the guy from Florida, he got his name from the guy in California, I think.
Oh, I thought that was his real name, Ricky Ross. No,
No, no,
Rick Ross.
no.
Uh,
That ain't
wasn't
his
he a
real name.
probation officer or something like that? Rick
Corrections,
Ross.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, 50
yeah.
Cent exposed them. People forget
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
People have short memories.
Yeah, but Rick called me because I never really left the inner city because I grew up there. Like, so I knew Tookie Williams and all these guys growing up, right? And so I never really left the hood, and I have a house there to this day, and I have friends and relationships with people that I just know. And so he called me up and said, "Hey man, I hear you're the guy that is connected to the community. You kind of help people out and blah blah blah. Can you get me into custody and talk to people?" So, that kind of made me feel good because it made me feel like I'm working both sides of the fence. I'm trying to keep people out of custody, but at the same time, I will take your ass to jail. If it gets like that, you know what I mean?
So he wanted to go in to speak to the jails. Is that what he wanted to do?
Yeah, we had an intervention program. So we would go in, I would go in, and some of us would go in, and we'd bring in people that would come in and talk to folks, especially the younger guys that are just kind of doing first time offenses and that kind of stuff, just to kind of keep them from coming back,
Yeah.
right? And so you got a dude named Rick Ross, who's infamous, Freeway Rick. He's coming in telling you, "Hey man, don't follow my path. I dodged a lifetime bullet and shit by coming, by the grace of God, but." At the end of the day, the sheriff didn't really. The sheriff was elected in LA County. He didn't really want to risk that politically. So, but I just thought that's an interesting story that people probably don't think about. Some dude gets out of prison after damn near doing life or was going to get life, calls up a division chief in the sheriff's department and wants to work with them. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Oh man. All right, so we got to do a part two in in person, face to face. I'll fly out to you, and then we'll fly out to Hawaii together. If
All
you could
right.
squeeze in, I know you're a busy, busy man, so if you could squeeze in the time, I give you plenty of advance notice, and then I'll expect that I'll probably be going on my own anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got extra room at the crib, so you can come out and stay at the house for free. So
Oh, back to the dealers. Was there anybody that was like uh on America's Most Wanted that made it out of the drug game? Because it seems everyone either ended up dead or in jail, and that's pretty much the message. But I know not every single person got caught, and some people were able to stash their money. Was there because it's such a deadly game, but
yeah,
But I know there's some people like the way Snowfall portrayed Ricky Ross was that he was smart with his money and he
Hmm.
was investing it because he had so much money. He was investing it and buying legitimate things. But I I'm sure that's like the 1% of the 1%.
Well, that's called money laundering too. So
Yes.
that's how they launder their money by buying legitimate stuff. Look, if you look at Narcos Mexico or you look at the Narcos series on Netflix, all of those cartel members, a lot of some, well, I wouldn't say a lot, many of them surprisingly are still alive. So yes, there are people out there making billions of dollars because in Mexico, everybody's involved. The government, the cops, the federales, everybody's involved. And it's really boils down to, hey, Dave, do you want to be involved in this game? You're like, I can't do that. Okay, well, I mean, this is a picture of your family. This is where they go to school. I mean, the choice is yours, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
So, um, yeah, so there are people out there, yes, that have survived. In terms of the African Americans that I was chasing back in the day, I'm sure there are some, but many of them ended up in jail at some point, um, and have been come out since. And I've even worked with them as gang interventionists later on, which is a whole nother irony. So,
Does
um,
as soon as we get done, I'm gonna have to look up Free Ray Ricky Ross because I've never
yeah,
seen what the real guy actually looks like. But does he tell the story of working with the CIA also? Is that his story?
I think he does. I think he, not with the CIA, but dealing with, so, these guys had Colombian cartel connections, right? you know. So they were, and the only reason the Colombian cartel dealt with them, I'm sure, is because they can move enough weight to even make it worth their while.
Right.
So, but that whole Freeway Rick stuff and all the stuff with the cartel connections with, maybe not, I wouldn't say the LAPD, but the government, U.S. government, and all that. I mean, I can't help but think there might be some scintilla of truth to that, but you know,
What a wild story. Oh my God. And
I
you
just
see
don't
my you
know.
see my flag. I love this country. I remember
Yeah.
growing up watching Mike Tyson fights and Don King waving the flag, and he would say, "Only in America
All
is
of
the
America.
greatest country in the world. Only in America can a guy like me." And he went to prison for murder.
Murder. Yeah.
Murder. Came out and then
Yeah.
became a boxing promoter.
Right. Yeah, you should check out. I mean, when you talk about the U.S. government, I don't want to get into too much of that stuff because I do a lot of history stuff. So look up. So Dulles was the head of the CIA, right? The guy is named after Dulles airports. There's a documentary on Dulles and uh, the term Banana Republic, right? And so just kind of take a look at the fruit wars in South America and how that came about and Dulles' connection to that. Actually, the U.S. government's connection to it.
Did you know, and I'll say this again, I absolutely love our country, uh, only in America. But did you know that 90% of the US history we've been involved in some kind of armed conflict?
Oh yeah,
Look up that stat. That's a crazy, crazy statistic.
yeah,
Like our
yeah.
our primary export is weapons.
But but politically speaking, publicly speaking, it's we're all against that, right?
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
I really do believe that you have to carry a big stick, walk quietly and carry a big stick. So I understand some of the things that we got involved with. Um, you know, it's always up for debate if we should ever be policing the rest of the world but like World War II, we were the country that was stood in, we stood at the forefront and we stood in the way of Hitler and Japan taking over the world.
well, I mean, we also, if your history, we were reluctant to even get in the war, and Roosevelt was secretly working with Churchill because it wasn't popular for us to get involved in that war as American citizens.
Yeah.
And all world wars start in Europe,
Yeah.
just like probably the next one's going to start because of European activity, right? And we somehow are somehow involved, right? Because we are supplying the Ukrainians with their weapons and their training and all
our
that.
number one export.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, number one export. But yes, they do start in Europe, but the benefit of keeping soldiers in the Middle East, and I've talked to a lot of soldiers who have said this, and I understand their point of view, is that we don't have to fight conflicts on our soil. So if they start over there, let's keep it over there. And if there's a conflict in the Middle East, let's keep it in the Middle East and not have to fight on US soil.
I don't know that I mean, if you look at us geographically, the United States is perfectly poised because we have friendlies to the north and the south. You know, if we were Israel, for example, all of us would be soldiers right out of high school,
Yep.
men and women, right? Like they are over there. So I think we have the advantage of having two oceans on the east and west, and then we have friendlies to the north and south, which is why when you look at Russia's position, so imagine if Russia made Mexico communist and was going to put missiles in Mexico, we
Yep.
would be fighting that tooth and nail,
Yes,
right?
we
Just
would.
like we did Cuba.
Yep. Or imagine if Russia made China their enemy, the biggest country that's to their east,
Right.
the largest nation. So that's why it's in their benefit to always be partners with China.
Yeah. 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 And it's natural resources and all that too. I think China's economy is collapsing. We just don't know it. But then again, they put out propaganda about us. We put out propaganda about them. But I do think there's some things happening in China that may, push their leaders to do some desperate things to kind of keep their economy afloat.
I've heard similar reports. Have you ever been to any of the Asian countries like Japan or China or Thailand?
I've been to Korea. I'm from Korea, but I've been there. I've been back since as an adult.
Okay. I've never been to Korea. It's on the list. I want to take some dance classes in Korea.
Yeah, man. So I mean, it's but I mean, Asia is a whole nother ball of wax, right? I mean, everything is about um, natural resources, be it oil, natural gas, uh, in the case of Taiwan, computer chips, whatever, right?
I laugh when people say that electric batteries are not sustainable. Um, because I actually looked it up to see if there was enough cobalt to supply the entire world, and there is. But even if we don't use cobalt, I read an article that said Toyota is working on a battery that will last 6,000 miles before it's needing a recharge. So whenever people say, "Oh, that's just a fad," or it's just because I remember hearing that hip hop was a fad. I remember growing up and people talking about Run DMC, oh, that'll die out. It's just a fad. It's not real music. And it's like some people can't see what's right in front of them. Like we're moving away from fossil fuels. A lot of countries, a lot of automakers have pledged 2030, 2035, and I consider myself an early adopter of things. Yeah, they may not be perfect right now, and you may have uh, some child labor in Africa that are digging out cobalt right now. But I truly believe that is the future. And that's, as we move towards that, the technology will get better and you won't necessarily have impoverished nations, digging for cobalt anymore. I think, they'll probably decide to go in another direction.
Maybe, and I think when we look at mining, we also look at it on dry land. I mean, there's when you look at the earth itself, a lot of it is covered by water, and there's the same things that are underneath the earth on dry land is underneath the earth in the ocean,
And
and so
asteroids as well.
right, right. So I think you have a point. My only concern about electric is so you have the enterprise of obsolescence. And so if I have a 6,000 mile battery, why would I market that when I can just keep selling you 300 or 400 mile batteries and make you have to keep, paying me, right?
Yeah, I agree. I understand forced obsolescence, but iPhone keeps making new phones every year. And I think if they keep making new cars, people will buy them, especially if you just like want the new style car. Cars are a little different than a phone, but phones are really expensive right now. Phones are $1,100 a phone.
Electric cars are expensive,
They
right?
are, they are,
You
but
know?
Tesla just dropped the price of the Model 3. So I think as they become more popular, prices will go down.
Well, yeah, they almost have to. But if you're gonna really push the world, or let's say the United States, to electricity, you got to really upgrade your grid. Um, in areas that have power outages, like in California, we at one time they were pushing the electric car, and then we have brownouts, and so the governor can't come on the air and say, we need you to not charge your car because we don't have enough to supply the grid. How are you going to get to work? I mean, so now I'm thinking I'm more of an advocate for hybrid vehicles rather than all electric because I don't want to get stuck. Um, at some point, and they're like law enforcement cars, we can't not be able to go. So
Yeah.
all your emergency services and all those vehicles have to either be hybrid or some type of petroleum vehicle.
I think
And
there'll be a battery charge pack that you can just, zap it and it'll juice up in less than 5 minutes.
yeah, yeah. Again, because you have a lot of volts coming through, like you push a 220, it's going to charge up much faster, or like the high powered voltage that Tesla has. But the other issue is, progressive politics is also regressive tax on. So the very people that progressives try to help, it hurts them. So as I raise this threshold for non-petroleum vehicles, the people that they can't, poor people can't afford that. They can't afford the vehicle. They can't afford the electricity.
The
And so
solution
it
is
either has
to get rich.
or some. Well, but again, they rail against that, right?
Yeah.
I've worked with progressives who don't even believe there should be billionaires, and no matter how much you tell them, look, money is not a finite piece of pie where you have more and I have less. It's infinite. It's
Yes.
infinite. You just got to, go for it. And so I think there needs to be some discussion about how progressive policies can sometimes hurt the very people they're trying to help.
Yeah, I've talked politics more with you than anyone else that I ever have, only because of the amount of time that you've had on the job. You've seen so many ups and downs and swings. It's very interesting to get your perspective on things. I respect your time, so I'm going to let you go. But I promise we'll do a part two, and we'll just talk about your career a little bit more and all the things that some of your favorite things that you've done. And like I said, Cecil, I really, really respect your time. I'm getting tongue tied. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and stay safe out there.
All right. I appreciate the invite. So anytime.
Talk to you soon.
Later.
All right, family. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Everyone I interview, I've chosen for you guys because of their story, and I hope that you get some value every single time. If you did get value or just simply enjoyed the episode, please share the episode with someone that you know. If you know of a guest, a frontline hero that has an amazing story, something uplifting or a positive message, hit me up in the contact form of www.davidleith.com or DM me at Instagram at davidleith1. Subscribe to the show because I have some really phenomenal guests coming up in the next few weeks that you definitely don't want to miss. All right, one.